Hi, Andrea. Welcome to the podcast. I am happy to have you here to talk about the importance and what psychological health is all about. So, it's a very important part of the whole wheel of health. And I think we're seeing more and more research that connects your psychological health to every aspect of your physical health as well. So, if you want to say hi and just tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll get going.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm a fan myself, and I'm so excited to be here. I'm a mom of three little boys, and they are 7 months, 3 years, and 5 years. And so, being a psychologist as their mom, I'm also just really interested in this question of how take care of my own psychological health with competing demands and the transition to motherhood, and then also how I raise my boys to have psychological health and physical health. And I guess I'm biased, but it's just as important, if not more important, than all of the things we do for our physical health, because it's how we interact with this world and how we're able to take care of our physical health when we're not taking care of ourselves psychologically. So I'm just excited to be here and talk about this topic that is really dear to my heart in so many different ways.
So how would you describe psychological health? If someone was to say, well, what is it all about anyway?
Yeah. So that's a loaded question, I think. Psychological health is we talk all the time in this country about, or just in general, about mental illness. And it's a shame because mental illness provides a stigma associated to something that is just a natural thing about us. And psychological health is the reverse of mental illness. And so mental illness is increasingly common in this country. It follows the patterns of chronic disease that we see. I mean, the rates of depression and anxiety and these childhood disorders are skyrocketing. And we're afraid to call it mental illness because it has this negative stigma attached to it. And people are afraid to admit that they have some psychological unhealth that they need support with. So psychological health is the wellness version of physical health, right? Where we're not focused on sickness, we're not focused on the side of the continuum where we're doing things, we're avoiding pain and suffering, whether it be mental suffering or physical suffering, but rather focusing on the things that make us feel well and make us feel alive, and not just happiness, but contentment and satisfaction and ability to cope with your environment all around you. I think psychological health gets connotated with this notion of being happy all the time. And you could be psychologically healthy without being happy all the time. It's not exuberance. Psychological health is not joy. Those are different things. They're accompanying it. But psychological health is being able to adapt in your environment and feel satisfied and fulfilled and contentment with what's going on around you, not struggling, not that mental illness side of the equation.
Yeah, that's a good distinction, because I really don't want to get into like the diagnosing of mental illness and like treating mental illness. That's really not what this podcast is about, and it's beyond my training. So I don't really want to dive into telling people how to deal with their mental illness.
Right.
But psychological health, like I said, is more of the wellness aspect of it. And I think that's a great distinction for people to make, that of where we're going with this and what the topic is about.
Mm-hmm.
So what are, I know you mentioned that it's not about being happy all the time or having joy all the time. And I think that's a big thing that people think that it's all about, that if they're psychologically healthy, then they always feel great and they always feel happy and joyful. But in my experience and what I see is that people who have the best psychological health or the highest psychological health actually do feel all their feelings and assimilate all their feelings and adapt, like you said, to them. So what are some things that people can do to promote a healthy psyche?
Yeah, yeah. So I think, when you were just talking there, what resonated with me was this notion of judgment. So I think one of the things, and I'm going to speak, um, I'm going to speak to, this is a statement that is applicable to anybody and anything, but I see it really commonly amongst holistic moms in particular. But I mean, it's general to anybody at all. But this notion of shoulds and oughts and these judgments we place upon ourselves to be better at insert whatever you want to insert, right? To be a better wife or to be a better mother or to be a better employee or to be a woman in the workforce or be a stay-at-home mom or whatever you're talking about. There are so many pressures and so many stressors in our daily life that make us feel inadequate. And that is inadequacy, or the perceptions of inadequacy, are a major driver to feeling psychologically unwell, because what gets inserted, and it is so implicit and so hard to detect, are all of these judgments we place on ourselves. So one challenge that I ask of the listeners right now is to just, in your daily routine, think about and note every time a should and ought, a should or an ought, start there. So like, I should go to I should have had dinner on the table by 6 p.m. Oh, my kids ought to be in bed by 8, but it's 9 o'clock. How many times we place judgments on ourselves in these implicit ways by using the language that we use. And over time, all of those shoulds, all of those oughts, all of those judgments we place on ourselves collectively add up to feelings of inadequacy that get in the way of our ability to feel joy, ability to feel contentment, ability to have psychological health. And with that, what happens, and this is what resonated with what you said, is that we tend to try to shut off. Like when we hear other moms or other people in our network say, oh, don't judge yourself, or don't be judgmental of others, we tend to shut off that feeling, that other side of emotion that is natural. It is natural to feel sad sometimes. It is psychologically healthy to feel sad. It's okay to be sad. If something bad happens, it's okay to feel sad about that something bad. Now, it's not healthy to continue on and to enter in a realm of grief and torment. And if you need support, get support. But to have a natural wave of feelings of happiness, feelings of sadness. If someone does you wrong, it's okay to experience the feeling of anger, and then getting over it, right? Those are natural feelings that my dog is going to bark in the background, I'm sorry. Natural feelings that we are supposed to feel in our daily life. And those are psychologically healthy feelings. Being psychologically healthy involves feeling all the feelings that we as human beings are supposed to feel. And when we start to judge those feelings, when we start to judge, I shouldn't be mad at this person, or I ought to not be sad because this other person's not sad, or I'm supposed to, being psychologically happy means I'm supposed to wake up in the morning and feel wonderful every single day. One, that's a level of perfection that nobody's ever going to experience, because nobody feels happy every single day. And two, being psychologically healthy means that you can experience all of these emotions and do so in a way that you could rebound quickly. So if you're extremely happy or extremely sad, you're able to come back to normal, come back to homeostasis, and live your life.
I think that's a great distinction, because like I said, people think that they should always be that picture perfect. And I've talked about this in a lot of other podcasts. And we keep going back to that should, how you should or shouldn't, and how that's not serving you at all. But in an environment of Facebook and Instagram and social media, there's even a larger amount of pressure, I think, that not only kids and teens and young adults are feeling, but also moms and older adults. I mean, they're on these platforms as well, right, and seeing these things. So let's go back to like moms and just, people in general. What are some tips that you have for creating a healthy psychological balance or a healthy psyche for those?
Yeah, I think a small snippets of time each day. So I'm not talking about, I know there's some moms listening probably right now who are like, where am I going to find time? I'm doing 25 million things. And I know you're probably right. You probably are. But brief moments where you could pause and take a breath. Just pausing and taking a breath and just observing what's around you, observing what's going on. So there's if you are feeling, so here's a very specific strategy that is very effective, where one of the things that happens when we begin to notice we're getting out of control, we're getting to feel overwhelmed with the stressors around us, we're feeling like we are modeling perfection and it's not serving us, we're feeling out of control of our emotions, we have to sort of bring it back. We have to be an overseer of our own mental health, our own psychological health, and be able to pull it back and say, wait, let me come back to me. And so the easiest way to do that is, one, in the moment when you notice it happening, by paying attention, and two, before it goes down a trajectory. And so by building in time, so these could be times like small snippets of time where you could just find silence. It could be 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be a long time each day, but just finding silence to sit for a moment and breathe and observing. So with modern society and the way we work, and particularly moms, our heads are going about a million miles a minute so many times and so often, and so rarely do we pause that. And people talk about meditation and all these different strategies, and those are wonderful, and I encourage you, and those are great tips, but not everybody knows how to meditate or feels comfortable doing it. And it doesn't have to be that serious, if I could say so myself. It could just be silence where you stop your thinking. So taking 5 minutes and not letting thoughts interfere in your brain, but just observing what's around you, just using sights and smells. And I mean, you could take this moment right now, you're listening to my voice, but if you pause for a moment, and so long as you're not driving, close your eyes and feel what if you're sitting, the bottom of the chair feels against your bum, or the feet against the floor, or the sounds you hear outside of my voice, or even the colors that are around you. Like, what are the colors of the lights shining from your lamp in the room you're in? Are they yellower or are they whiter? And just bringing it back to your 5 senses, bringing it back to what your sensory experience is, often gives you just that momentary pause where you could take a breath and then you could move on, and it recenters you. It's all about that recentering, to pull it back to who you are, because you are enough. You are good, and you are enough, and you are not failing. All those thoughts that you have in your head about failure, because trust me, we all have them. We live in a society where we're always measuring up. So if you could interrupt that pattern and just observe what's around you without placing judgments on it, without the worry or the time or the stress or anything else, and just observe and take a moment and pause, it will truly, truly help you. And make it a regular practice. Doing it once, it's probably not going to do too much. Doing it often can be really life-changing. Related to that, I just want to throw one other little snippet out there for tips for people who, because the flip side of psychological health is psychological unhealth. And one of the most common behaviors or thoughts that impact our psychological health is anxiety. We worry constantly. We worry about everything all the time, constantly. It's just something we do as a society. And medication is not the answer to anxiety. And we're not going to go into that, but this is an evidence-based strategy that is I tell this to moms I come across with all the time. I can't tell you how much I recommend this tip, and it's called worry time. And when I tell you this, you're going to probably chuckle and be like, that sounds silly, or that doesn't sound like it would do anything. You don't know my level of anxiety. No, that might be fine if you're just worrying a little, but you don't know my level of anxiety. And I'm going to tell you, before I even tell you the tip, that I've done this with folks who have severe debilitating anxiety to the point where they can't even leave their house, and it works for them. So I promise you, if you're disciplined in the practice, it will work for you too. So here's what it is. Worry is not really functional. It serves no purpose. Having worry about what's going to happen in the future is simply wasting your energy and draining you from the moment you're in now. It's draining your mindfulness because you cannot change what's going to happen in the future. Sure, you could work for it and you could do things to create your future, but the pure worry and the pure anxiety, it's not going to get you there. It's going to get in your way of getting there because you are spending energy on the outcome you don't want. And so I see all the time moms being robbed of contentment and joy and satisfaction and their ability to feel all these emotions and all this psychological health because they're spending their days worrying. And so here's my suggestion. Develop worry time. Worry time is a block of time, and you decide how much you need. I'm going to put out there, you take a half hour every day, depending on how much time you need. And it's the same time every day. So maybe it's when your kids are in school and you have a half hour to spend. Maybe it's right before you go to bed. Maybe it's right when you wake up in the morning. But you choose a time and you close the world away during that time. Ask for support to watch your kids. Ask for support to do whatever you do during that time. But spend that time for yourself and go sit in your room. And you worry about every possible thing you could possibly worry about during that time. So click that stopwatch to go, and at 2 p.m. you start worrying. And you could write it down. Sometimes people find it helpful to write things down and journal everything you could worry about. Go down the tangent. Allow yourself to feel every single worry in the world. Anything you could possibly worry about in that day, write it down. And then when your 20 minutes or a half hour is up, stop worrying. Worry time is over. And then continue on your day. And for the rest of the day, if any worry or anxiety or anxious thought pops into your head, push it to the side and save it for worry time, because it's not welcomed during not worry time. And remove it from your psyche. You could write it down if it's really important. If that worry is so important that you must remember it the next day, go ahead and write it down. But don't deal with it. Don't let it ruminate in your head. Don't do anything with it until worry time the next day. And then worry your life away on it for that half hour, but then move on.
I think that's an awesome tip, because I have talked with moms that they say that they worry all the time. They have anxiety, and I've talk to them about how you can't control what's going to happen in the future and you can't change what happened in the past. And 99% of the things that you are worrying about are not going to probably come true anyway. So it's a waste of energy. It's a waste of time. But that tip of giving them permission to have that time to feel those feelings and worry is awesome. I can see how that works. I can totally understand how that works.
Don't expect perfection. So the first week, it takes discipline. It's a disciplined practice. But what you will find over time, I assure you, if you do this disciplined practice every day, is that before long, the amount of time you need to worry might end up whittling down to like 5 minutes, because you've realized that this is a waste of my time and I'd rather just be doing something else. And those worries no longer are controlling your life. There's something that you could control. They may still be there. We all worry about things. Worry is a natural emotion. The goal is to not worry about anything. The goal is not to let worry control your life.
So talking about kids, because a lot of people who listen have kids, what are some tools that you have for developing a good psychological health in children? It starts when they're really, really young, but what are some things in those little kids, preteen, even teenage years, some tools that you give that demographic or the parents to help their kids with?
Yeah, so it's a really great question, because I think in our society, we don't let kids be kids very often. I think I'm a holistic mom like yourself, and uh, I think our sub-community does a really good job at this, at allowing children to develop social emotional skills in general. I mean, that's a sweeping generalization, but, you know, a lot of schools, a lot of very mainstream things want compliance and obedience, and it's placed at the expense of emotional development and social emotional development. And so the first and utmost thing to develop high quality social emotional skills, particularly in little kids, but this extends throughout development, is play. Let your kids play. Downtime playing, imaginative play. Let them do it. Play is so important and so functional. One of my biggest stressors, I'm going to call it, or things that bothers me the most, I was going to say pet peeve, but it's so much bigger than that, is this notion of the taking away of imaginative play in kindergarten classrooms and the reduction of things like recess in older years. Play is critical to development because it is through play that kids learn to process their emotions. It's through playing in the kitchen that they're able to process all of the emotions throughout the day and figure out how they feel about it and what did they observe and what does that mean and how can I process this and integrate this into my being. Play is the way that kids are able to make sense of the world around them and integrate it into themselves. And so number one is play. Number two is the validation of feelings. So very often when a kid is upset or a kid is crying, we say, don't be sad about that. That's nothing to be sad over. Or why are you crying? Just be happy now, right? We place judgments on kids' feelings, and often there are times they're the feelings we need to feel ourselves. Like we need something bad happened. I should see, I'm judging myself. No, but I think I should not feel sad about that, right? Or you have a limited range of emotions. Kids are great at experiencing their full range of emotions, and yet we often stop it. We try to squeeze them into being happy all the time. Acknowledging, now I would like to, before I move on with this, I would like to delineate two things: the emotion and the behavior. So you can validate a child's emotion. I see you feel sad right now. Boy, you look really frustrated. I could see how that's really big disappointment. And condoning a behavior that's not appropriate. So I see you're really angry, but it's still not okay to hit. Those are two different things. I see you're really sad, but we can't lay on the floor in a tantrum. Would you like a hug? So you could mold and teach appropriate behaviors associated with the emotion, but still validating that emotion. The emotion is okay. The emotion is good. Allow our kids to not only feel these emotions, but know what they are. So with my children, and what I used to do in my clinical training, I did a lot of therapy work with serious and violent youth offenders and of all ages. And one of the things that I often taught, especially younger kids, was how they felt. How do you feel? So this is for moms, and I'm directing it oftentimes for pretty much any mom of a very young child, like toddler, preschool aged. But this is true for teenagers as well, because teenagers now, they're experiencing this complexity of emotion that is like a whole new ballpark. So this is applicable across the developmental spectrum, and it's labeling the emotions for them. So we often say, how do you feel? And we don't recognize that a small child or a teenager doesn't know how they feel, because they're really in tune with their core being. They feel like their heart's beating fast and they're breathing fast and they feel like they just want to explode. But they don't always know that that means they're angry, or more complex emotions like frustrated or disappointed, or I feel really intense. Those higher level vocabulary words about emotions, if we teach our kids those by using them and by labeling them for them when they can't. For example, if my son is really upset because, I don't know, he wanted a toy and I said no. upset, mad, it's really disappointed because you wanted a toy and I said no. And now it opens an opportunity for social emotional learning that wouldn't have been there if I just said, tough, you didn't get the toy, move on. We take that moment to pause and label the emotion, teach them that these are emotions, they're natural, they're normal, but you're still responsible for your behavior associated with it. I could see you're really mad, but hitting's not the right answer, So I think I got lost on a tangent a little bit there, but really developing emotionality and developing how kids could be psychologically healthy starts from being able to identify their emotions, articulate their emotions, and say them. And a lot of that comes from our ability to say it ourselves. Like, they're going to model what they see. If they see mom getting angry and mom yells, then guess what they're going to do when they're angry? So you using your emotion words. I say all the time, like, before, when I notice that my kids are starting to, they're not listening and we have to get out of the house and all this stuff is happening, I'll say to them, honey, mommy's feeling really frustrated right now because I'm asking you to put your shoes on and you're not doing it. And they learn from me doing that. One, it's okay that mom feels frustrated. Frustrated's an okay emotion to have. That their actions created the frustration because they're not listening. And that's okay because I still love them. And how to label the emotions and how to communicate. And so that's like in these micro minutes of the day, we're able to do that ourselves. We're able to do that for our children until they develop the skills themselves. And what happens is they become very emotionally regulated. And that's really like the core of psychological health. If you could be emotionally regulated, because what follows suit and what gets carried along with emotional regulation that we haven't really got into is this whole notion of self-efficacy and the feeling that they could do it, that they are in control of their life and their being, and that's a big piece of emotional health. But if you feel like you could control your emotions and you could control your reactions to the world around you, then that's a huge piece of it. So that's what I focus on with my children. No matter how old they get, we're focusing on emotional regulations, that people care about how you feel, you can express how you feel, and you could regulate how you feel.
I think a lot of parents are still working on that skill set as well. So, I mean, I know there's times where I get emotional and I act out in a way, and then I have to go back and say, to my kids, and I'll say, I'm sorry. And which I think is a good tip too, is like, you don't have to be perfect as a parent and have to have this down. Right. But just the acknowledgement of like, I'm sorry, I was frustrated and I acted in a way I shouldn't have behaved, also teaches the kids that, they don't have to always react perfectly. It's okay to have that emotion as well. So, but yeah.
That's exactly right. I see that, especially amongst, I'm really active with the gentle parenting community. And I see that a lot where people want to be gentle parents. And I'm a gentle parent. I think it's a wonderful thing. But that doesn't mean you can't show your children emotions, because the truth of the matter is they're going to either go to school or go to a workplace or be out in a social scenario, and somebody's going to get mad at some point in their life. Somebody's going to get mad at them, and maybe they'll be in line at the grocery store and somebody will be yelling. And being able to handle that in an appropriate way is a really important life skill. Being able to say, oh, that person was just in a bad mood and it doesn't reflect my psyche, it doesn't get into my sense of self, is really important. And so I'm certainly not advocating yelling at your children all the time, but showing true emotion when you feel it and apologizing when it's inappropriate is a huge skill set. Because could you imagine what a world would look like if all of the adults now appropriately responded with the appropriate level of emotion and then apologized when they were not responding appropriately, right? Like, I feel like our world would be a different place. So that's sort of the approach I take of being real, because my kids need to see the real, authentic, true people do, but making sure that it's not to an extreme level. Like, they don't need to see extreme anything.
Yeah. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about why you think that emotional health is so important, not only for our psyche and our relationships, but also for our physical health.
Yeah. So this notion that our bodies and mind are separate is just somewhat of an outdated idea. It's really hard to differentiate. Um, I'm going to say mental health and physical health these days, because our mind controls our body and our body controls our mind. So, you know, we'll take depression, for example, or anxiety, since we talked about anxiety before. And you know, I'm a psychologist, not a psychiatrist, so I tend to fall in line with environmental predictors of behavior and things like that. But for those who are familiar with the whole notion of serotonin, right? Serotonin's a chemical in your brain, a neurotransmitter in your brain that has been implicated in depression. Serotonin, many of the precursors for serotonin and the health of serotonin in your body is created in your gut, meaning your digestive tract. And so right there, it's like, you could just think of the brain as a separate system, or you could think of it as part of your whole overall health, your whole overall being. So if you have digestive problems, you may be also experiencing some mood problems. Now, is the mood getting in the way of the depression, or the depression getting in the way of the mood? You know, they're so intricately related. You also see this with people suffering things like Parkinson's disease, right? And then they have depression related to it. Well, did the depression start, or did the physical health start? They're just so intricately related that our body is one whole system. The brain is not distinct. So this was my point with the neurotransmitters. It's like what's happening in our brain and the chemical composition of our brain is not distinct from what's happening in our body. So whether the mood starts first and then you feel your body is starting to hurt, or your body's starting to hurt and then your brain is reacting, they're not distinct processes. You are one whole person. Your mind, body, and soul are one. And so as we think about health, it encapsulates mental health or psychological health and physical health, because it's really hard to be super physical healthy and be in a bad place mentally. And it's hard to be in a bad place mentally, but being super physically healthy. I mean, the whole notion of just taking a jog to clear your mind, right? That's like an old adage, but there's truth to it, because our bodies and minds are connected. So, you know, focusing on the whole being, your whole system, and targeting one or the other, you're going to shift the scale. And, you know, if you're needing more support with psychological health and you don't know where to go by just thinking about the psychological aspects of things, take care of your physical body. Your mind may respond, and vice versa. If you're having a hard time with something physically and you just need a switch of things, focus on psychological health, self-care, and you may feel better physically. So intricacy of how these two things, even though they're disparate fields where we talk about them separately, they're really not separate. We're one human that is made up of a mind and a body.
I think that science now is showing that it is so intricately related that, you know, you just can't separate them now. People don't even often talk about them separately anymore, and if they do, they're way behind the eight ball.
Right.
So, I know even with clients I take care of them more on a physical level, but we talk about in chiropractic the 3 T's: thoughts, traumas, and toxins, and we've talked about that since the beginning of chiropractic. So we've known in holistic health that it has been intricately related for over 100 years. You know, in Asian history, it's been over thousands of years that they've known that there's been a relationship. So it's not new, but science seems to just be catching up to it in how they can actually test it.
I recently published a paper with the ICPA, which is the International Children's Pediatric Association, on quality of life and mental health, the benefits of chiropractic care for kids with quality of life. And depression and anxiety were one of the outcomes we looked at. And indeed, that these were kids who came into the chiropractor's office for whatever reason, and their quality of life improved even in just a short number of visits. I mean, it wasn't, we held constant, we took out, how many visits they've been to, but, as they went through chiropractic care, their risk of having symptoms related to depression, symptoms related to anxiety were significantly less likely through chiropractic care.
Which is huge considering the amount of depression, anxiety, and suicide in teens, and it's just growing.
Yeah.
So,
right.
It just shows you how that mind-body connection is so, so, so important. And that's why we're talking about psychological health today. So, I mean, that's awesome. You have so many great tips, so many good things that people can take and use in their families right away. Is there anything you want to end with?
No, I just want to thank everyone for listening today, because I started off by talking a little bit about mental illness and the stigma associated with it. And I just love that you're talking about psychological health on the show, because, the notion that you're sick or you have a disease if you're not psychologically healthy it doesn't resonate well with me, because you could get well, because people could get well, and with support and with help. And no matter, it depends on where you are in your trajectory. Maybe you need professional help. Maybe you just need a little bit of time. I don't know where you are in your trajectory, but psychological health is not something that is unachievable, that everyone could get there. And there's times in everybody's life where we feel psychologically unhealthy. There's times in everybody's life where we feel not enough, or like we need more support, and we need to move into that wellness category. And so if we could start removing that stigma where we're either talking about severe mental illness or nothing, and start talking about psychological health and supporting those moms to get them, and supporting kids to get them psychologically healthy from the start, man, it would have such an impact on our society. It would have an impact on our physical health, on our emotional health, and just overall pulse and climate of the world we live in, because it's not enough to just not have severe mental illness. We really need to move the pendulum to an upswing here, to say, let's just not focus on the lack. Let's focus on supporting psychological health. Let's support on focusing on emotional regulation and developing kids who could talk about their emotions and feel their emotions and be content and satisfied in life and be able to engage socially. So I thank you for bringing that on. I encourage people who are struggling with more challenging areas to get professional help, because you too can. And by professional help, I don't, I'm not being prescriptive. Find the thing that works for you. I believe in holistic care and taking care of the body and mind through natural resources and, things like talk therapy. Do the things that work for you, but everybody can achieve wellness. It is achievable. So let's eradicate that stigma that's associated with it, because this is all a continuum of normal. And so no matter where you are, you can move on it, and we can all move towards psychological health in the long term.
Well, thank you so much, Andrea. Do you have contact information or any resources that you want to send for people?
Yeah, we have a Facebook, or the best thing would be our Facebook page right now. We also have a Facebook group for specifically for holistic parents. So the Facebook page is called Doctors Andrea and Eric's Treehouse. You can find it the easiest way by clicking facebook.com/treehouse living. And it is a movement of empowered parents, holistic parents who really want to support the social, emotional, and physical health of their children. And we talk gentle parenting, we talk natural healthcare, we talk gut health, we talk the whole holistic shebang. And then we also have a group called Holistic Parents Parenting Together on Facebook. You could find it there, where that's our support page where people could ask questions. And, you know, there's a lot of mom groups on Facebook, but there's not many for like-minded moms. So that is our space where we invite others to become friends and help each other out.
Great. Thank you so much. I will make sure I get the links to those so people can find them in the show notes, and hopefully on our Facebook group too. We have a Fearless Family Health Facebook group where we are linking all the podcasts and continuing the conversation there as well. So thank you so much.
Awesome.
And thank you so much for sharing everything and your expertise and your passion.
Thank you. I really enjoyed being on here today.
Bye.